Just this one incredible ingredient is going to magically make your orchid burst into roots immediately. And we'll explain to you exactly how we do that in this video. And welcome to the Nature Company. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Let me explain to you how this one magic ingredient can make your orchid instantly. Notice the word instantly and magically. They're never going to work. Sorry for the clickbait, but as soon as you hear that, you know it's not actually going to work, because your orchid is never instantly or magically going to do anything. To get your orchid to get all this amazing new root growth from having a struggling past is not an instant thing. If anything, as Miss Orchid Girl says, it's time. And with time, all things are possible. Chilies, yeah, they may be good for certain parts of your orchid, like insect repellents or insecticides, but to magically make your orchid grow roots, nope, I'm afraid not. To get your orchids to suddenly shoot up all these amazing roots, even though it's dry and desiccated, is more got to do with the amount of time you spend making sure your orchid gets what it requires to grow properly. So other than time, I would suggest understanding your Phalaenopsis is the #1 ingredient to get your orchids to produce roots. We need to understand that they are tropical plants, they grow in the tropical areas, and they're epiphytes growing on trees, so these roots are generally exposed to the air. Generally, they produce roots to search out for that water, to look for that moisture. And if you're watering too frequently, other than rotting the roots in your pot, you're going to be providing it with more moisture than it needs, and it won't send out any further roots because it thinks it's getting enough water. And then when all your roots rot off, your leaves are going to start to wither, and then it won't have enough energy to produce all these new roots again. Also, being from the tropics, Phalaenopsis like those high humidity environments, preferably around 80% if you can manage that at all, but they'll sort of survive in as low as 60% environments. So ensuring that it's got high enough humidity ensures that your plant's leaves and roots aren't going to desiccate too quickly, which means you're not going to have to overwater. Because overwatering is another big problem with Phalaenopsis. They like to get moist and then dry out a little bit and then have more moisture available to them, but without being constantly soggy. The higher humidity levels, the slower the evaporation rate will be, and the less you'll need to water. It will then also be able to draw moisture directly from the air through the velamen in these roots. And if your humidity levels are too low, often you land up watering it too frequently and you'll end up getting a really boggy mix, and that's what will rot your roots and make you have to look to get it to set new roots again. And Phalaenopsis are also very temperamental. They like to stay on the warmer side of things. They don't particularly like to go below 15 degrees Celsius for any extended periods of time. So if you can keep them in areas where their temperatures aren't going to drop too far. Also, we've got to understand their light requirements. They like nice bright lit areas, but without any direct sunlight. If your leaves are too darker green, you know they're getting too little sun, and they're producing as much chlorophyll as they can so that they can produce enough energy in the dark conditions to be able to keep the plant growing and producing new leaves and roots. But as the amount of energy that they can produce from the chlorophyll in their leaves diminishes, the darker it gets, so your plant is less likely to be able to get the energy it needs to carry on growing. So give it nice bright light conditions so that it can get all that photosynthesis it needs done to produce energy to grow. And feeding your orchid. Since your orchid is now kept in an artificial environment where it's not getting the food that it would generally get either from the rain, which has got all that good nitrogen in it, or falling leaves that get caught in around the roots, or that tannin that gets washed down the bark of the trees, we're going to have to feed our orchid. But remember, don't overfeed it. Feed it in very low quantities, but feed it regularly. And when growing it in an artificial environment, you've got to check out for pests. Things like those mealybugs and aphids can pop in. It doesn't matter where you're growing them, especially if your orchid does become under a little bit of stress from either not getting enough light or having enough humidity, that those pests will seem to arise magically as if an ingredient were used. So just keep an eye on those pests to keep that to a minimum. The healthier your orchid is, the more likely it is able to fight those pests off itself. But it's always good to keep an eye out for those stray ones that might latch on anyhow and get rid of them as quickly as possible before they multiply, because they can spread disease. So I would say the magic ingredient is understanding your orchid and providing it with its needs. And then it will provide you with all those beautiful roots, leaves, and blooms to keep you happy too. So remember, roots like this aren't going to happen overnight. It's a slow process. And anyone who says any different is telling you fibs. A lot of those people selling those magical cures live in the tropics anyway. And that's where Phalaenopsis loves to grow without the help of any magical ingredients anyway. So keep an eye out for that. Understand nothing in life is a quick fix, and certainly not when it comes to orchids. Also remember, when using a so-called wonder cure, if it does happen to force those roots out of your plant, if you haven't changed the environment your plant is growing in at all, it's just going to go back to exactly the same way as it was before. So if your plant is not happy where it is, move it to a place that's going to be more suitable for it to grow, and you'll find it will recover by itself anyway. And also, when understanding that it's an epiphyte, you know that the roots need good air movement. Even if they're in a pot, make sure that your media has enough air spaces to allow for air movement in the pot, so those roots can get that air movement. They need respiration in order to be able to carry out the functions that they do. And ensure that it's a good enough draining media, so that the water isn't clogging up those pores, so that the orchid roots can still breathe. As soon as your orchid roots aren't able to breathe or respire, that's when you start having those problems of root rot, because they are no longer able to absorb in those nutrients and water that's required, and they'll start to die and rot in your pot. And then of course you can get all those troubles with that rot spreading up into your plant itself. So healthy, happy roots breed a healthy, happy plant, make a healthy, happy person. By reducing the stress on your plant, you're reducing the stress on your life, because your plant will then be able to look after itself, mostly anyway. We are beginning to post some exclusive content in our Buy Me a Coffee link down below. So if you're interested in that, hit us up there. We also have a dedicated WhatsApp line to help you with any problems that may be occurring with your orchids. If you find any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming videos so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.